Welcome everyone to another Concord and Victory talk. Today we're in Sixth Form Centre with Nigel and Finn. They're both in the medical sector. Nigel is a renowned consultant and Finn is his 5th year in medical school. So do you guys want to tell us a bit about yourself?
Right, well, good evening all. So I'm Nigel Rossiter and I was here last century. I'm a dinosaur. I left here a long time ago, and when I left here, we were just talking, there were only 3 day pupils. There were 12 girls when I arrived, there were 24 when I left, and there were 763 pupils at the school. And I had an absolutely brilliant time at Stowe. Stowe was 5 of the best years of my life, so much so that I didn't get very good A-levels. And I had to retake, and that was a real lesson in itself about retaking A-levels, and we'll talk a bit about that, particularly about whether that's something you can do in this day and age if you're going to think about doing medicine. So I left Stowe, retook my A-levels, and then I joined the army for a short period of time, and then went to medical school, and then rejoined the army. And I was in the army for almost 20 years as a trauma surgeon, trauma orthopaedic surgeon in the army. Left the army after going to far too many places around the world. Did a bit with what we slightly unfairly call the Hereford cricket team, the SAS. And then I joined the NHS, and I was in the NHS as a trauma surgeon for 20 years. I retired last year, and I now run an international charity that teaches people how to deal with major injuries all over the world. So I run projects in 88 countries around the world, and I sit on the trauma committee at the World Health Organization, and I plan surgical education for places all over the world. And then the way we're going to do tonight, I'll hand over to Finn because most of the first bit of this is going to be for Finn. What we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about, Finn's going to start and talk a little bit about his career and his path into medicine, which has been slightly different, about his time in professional sport. And then we'll talk about, for those of you who want to do medicine, about applications, about work experience, about UCAS and UCAT, which we'll explain and you guys already understand. We'll talk a little bit about interviews at universities and medical schools. We'll talk about what it's like to be at a medical school, and we'll also talk a bit about gap years. And I'll admit that I'm very biased one way, but that'll be obvious in a minute. And then Finn will hand over to me, and I'll talk a little bit about careers in medicine, how those are structured, how you are going to take exams until you're in your late 30s, so you're only halfway through taking your exams in your lifetime at the earliest. Opportunities in medicine and outside medicine, and we'll also talk a little bit about other careers in the medical field, so not just medicine, we'll talk a bit about physiotherapy and nursing and any other careers that you might be interested in pursuing. So I'll hand over to Finn, who will tell you he wasn't at Stowe.
Yeah, sorry, I'm a bit of a traitor. Also, I'm significantly younger than Dad, unsurprisingly. So I didn't go to Stowe. I went to school. Well, I went to two schools for secondary. I went to Pangbourne, and then I went to Wellington in the sixth form. And then from there, like Dad says, I took a slightly, I suppose you could call it a slightly different route into medicine. In that it's pretty standard in that I did my A-levels. I got the grades I needed to get. I got into the places I did, which I'll go through in a second. And then had a year out and then went to med school, which is pretty standard. But what is different is the year that I had out, I'd spent playing professional rugby for RIP, now what is London Irish. So yeah, it was really quite different, especially when I compare to my mates who did gap years, who went and saw the world, and I saw the West London mud for most of my gap year. But yeah, it's just something that's a little bit different. So I suppose I'll start off with I know that you guys know, you guys who applied to medicine, you know about the process, and I don't know where anyone here who is applying to medicine knows about it. I'll talk about that a little bit, sort of my experience of it, tips maybe, things like that, and then I can talk about my pro sport, which I'm sure some of the third formers here are pretty keen to hear about. So the first thing I will say before I go through it all is that anyone who is going to apply to medicine, and actually probably anything healthcare related, physiotherapy, nursing, whatever it may be, the hardest part is getting in. And I think a lot of people do say that, and you think, oh yeah, whatever. Don't get me wrong, there is a lot to do at medical school. It's tough. I'm in the middle of, I'm on a week off at the moment, but I'm in the middle of a really intense placement, and I've got lots of things to do outside of that. But I still don't think it holds a candle to getting in. So, and I know I'm not trying to put you off applying. I'm just saying that please, when and if you do bear in mind, it gets better. It's what I think is a bit of a ridiculous hoop jumping exercise, and it's just unfair. But it's the nature of it because we know how many hundreds and thousands of people apply to medicine. So the first thing I'm going to talk about, which unfortunately I think if you guys may be a bit late, you've just submitted your applications, but in terms of work experience, now I know this has changed since when I applied. So I applied back in 2018 or 2017, one of the two. And it was a requirement to have work experience of some form, whether that be volunteering or work experience. You had to have it to apply to medical school. Now I've now got rid of that for the right reasons, in that it's hard to get work experience, and most people who get it, like me, get it through nepotistic ways, if we be completely honest. However, what I would say is just because it isn't a requirement, I enormously recommend that you do some form of work experience. Whether that be work experience as, I'm here as a work experience, I might want to be a doctor or a nurse, or whether that be volunteering in the hospital as a hospital volunteer, just to get an idea about what being in a hospital is like. Because I can think of at least 3 people that I went to school with at Wellington who did work experience and chose not to apply to medicine. Because I think a lot of people, I'm not necessarily saying people in this room, I think lots of people apply to medicine because they'll watch a medical drama on the TV, your Grey's Anatomy and that kind of thing. I can't say I've watched it, but I've heard plenty about it. All of my friends will always say, oh yeah, I saw that on Grey's Anatomy. It's like, yeah, right, whatever. But that is not, especially in the UK, that is not what working as a doctor or a nurse or a physio is like. It is fantastic. It's something that I love going to placement every day, and I cannot wait to qualify and have it as my job. But lots of people realise what it's actually like and go, actually, sod this. So I really recommend, if you can, get some exposure in the hospital. And if you have nepotistic ways of getting that, there is no shame in that. Use them. It's fine. Unfortunately, it is somewhat how the world goes round.
I used to have, in my time in the NHS, I had people like you on work experience with me literally every other week. So I used to have 25 to 30 students with me throughout the year, and I would guess only 40% of them went on to apply for medicine, having had their eyes opened and the rose-tinted specs taken off. I think it's, as Finn said, I think it's really important you go and see it for what it really is like.
And then so the other parts of the applications before we get to interview. Now I know they've now got rid of the BMAT, correct?
Yeah. It's just the UCAT.
It's the first year now just the UCAT. Okay, that's a good thing. In that so when I didn't do the BMAT. When I applied, I decided to only apply to medical schools that did the UCAT because I didn't want to do 2 different exams. Sorry, guys. So when you apply to medicine, you have to do entrance exams similar to like when you apply to Oxbridge. But the difference with the medical one is it's a standardised one throughout the whole country. So the exam called the UCAT. It is, I'm not trying to put you off again, it is still to this day my least favourite exam I've ever sat. I'm still slightly unsure as to how it decides if you're going to be a good doctor or not. They gave it to a load of these guys and they all did awfully on it. So anyway, it's an exam, it tests, it's like abstract reasoning. Yeah, that's why I can remember it. The abstract reasoning is the worst part. There's lots of different things. And you get a score from it. And that score goes to any medical school you apply to. Now, different medical schools view it in different ways. And this is where, if you are going to apply to, I know this is specific to medicine, no other healthcare careers. This is where, I would never say be tactical about where you apply, but this is one place where you do have to be a little bit tactical, because you get your score on your UCAT, you get it as soon as you take the exam in a driving theory test centre, and you walk out and they give you a piece of paper and it gives you your score. And having done loads of practice, you'll know what's a good score, what's a bad score, etc. Now, if you get, like I say, you know your score before you submit your applications. If you do poorly on the UCAT, that's okay, because there are medical schools who don't really pay much attention to it. They will still look at it, they won't pay much attention to it. Similarly, on the other side, if you do unbelievably well, use that to your advantage. There were some medical schools, I don't know if it's the case now, but when I applied to medicine, Edinburgh was the only medical school that didn't even do interviews. They literally put everyone through, everyone through who had the grades, etc., ranked everyone from top to bottom on the UCAT score, took the top however many and gave them an offer. I think it's probably different now because that's a really stupid way of getting medical, but that's how it worked when I did it. So you have to be tactical about it with this exam. And like I say, it's not a nice exam, but there are courses you can go on to prepare for it, there's books you can get, etc., and then just, get through it. And the other part before we get is obviously UCAS as a whole. You have your personal statement and you have your other things. Now this is actually something that I would extend out to some of you who might be here to hear me talk about rugby, and you're not here for medicine. This is applicable to you when you apply to anything at university. Is that obviously you need to get the good grades to go, and that's what you get offered AAB or whatever it may be. But so many people, especially now that's worked off predicted grades rather than ASs, so many people will have the predicted grades that are needed. So what's going to make you different to all the people that have those predicted grades? And what I'm talking about here in terms of UCAS is, yes, your personal statement, which we can talk about as well in terms of medicine, but also what else are you doing outside of your academics? What sports are you playing, especially if you guys are here to hear me talk about that. For me, obviously, rugby was a massive part of it, but it wasn't just rugby. I was in, believe it or not, I was in school plays. Don't go look them up because it's probably pitched in line, which are awful, but I was in school plays and we did lots of other different bits and bobs. And that just does make you an attractive person, a person university wants. Societies at a university are a huge part of the workings of the university. They want people to take part of those. If I'm someone who I can churn out grades but do nothing else, what do I really add to that uni? And that's massively the case for medicine.
I'll just expand on that very slightly. There's a thing when you apply, particularly for medicine, but for almost any healthcare profession, is that when you apply, Finn's been through the application process. I've been the guy on the other side of the desk interviewing people like you to go to medical school. And what we really look for is what we call resilience. So the fact that you're applying, hopefully that means you're already in the top 5% academically, because you're going to need to be in the top 5% to actually get into medical school. And that was almost a given. So what we're looking for, as Finn said, is we're looking for something else. What is it that makes you different? What makes you stand out from the crowd? And are you someone who has other strings to your bow? Because that's going to make you resilient. That's going to make you a better doctor, being able to cope with all the stresses of being in hospital or GP practice. And if you are someone who just sits and does nothing but work, I can guarantee you won't get in. Right? You need to be showing something else. And it doesn't matter what it is, whether you play the French horn, whether you run cross country, you are in the dramatic society, you do congreve, you do whatever you do. And the more you do, almost the better. But you need to show that you do something else. And if you do something to an exceptional level, then you should play on that. If you're a grade 8 cellist, then tell people about that. If you're an international rugby player or a hockey player or whatever, tell them about it.
Yeah. So anyway, I think I've waxed lyrical enough about sort of the pre-interview stage. Now, the interviews, there are a couple of different formats when you interview, which I'm sure some of you, those of you who might be applying will know about. So the main two is a panel or a thing called MMI, so multiple mini interviews. A panel interview is what you'd expect an interview to be. You sit behind a desk with 2 or 3 people talking to you. They'll ask you about your personal statement, and they'll ask lots of the classic questions: why medicine, etc., etc. Now, I'm actually a bit controversial in this, and it might be wrong with you guys to know. I actually much prefer the MMI process to the panel, mainly because with a panel interview, if it's going badly and you've messed up or whatever it may be, that is your only interview. Whereas with the multiple mini interviews, which is when you go into a room and there's 7, I think it's 7, so however many stations there are, you go into each one, it's a different question in each place, and it's like a reset every time. And I remember, so I had 3 interviews, 2 of them were panel, 1 was MMI. And the MMI one of the stations, I really, really messed up. It was awful. I had the marker was almost looking like he felt sorry for me. I can't even remember what the question was, but it was awful. But I came, and the other ones went fairly well, and I got a place. And I can guarantee you the score for that one station was probably like 0. But I'd done fairly well in the other place to get. I don't go to that medical school, but I got a place there, and that's why I really prefer the MMIs. The MMI seems really scary, and it seems quite daunting because there's loads going on. It's really busy. It's super fast. You've got 4 minutes, whatever, to answer a question or whatever it is, and it's hard. But honestly, take solace in that it's a reset each time you go in. And you might even find they might have set one station to be harder than the others to see how you rebound from that. Honestly, I wouldn't put it past medical schools to do that kind of thing. We have OSCEs that are like that. Now the fun bit, medical school. Medical school is brilliant. It is absolutely brilliant. I'm in my 5th year of it now. I'm in my 4th year of medicine because I intercalated last year, but I'm in my 5th year of medical school. Sorry, so an intercalation is usually after at least 2 years. You can do it after your 2nd, 3rd, or 4th year. Each medical school is different, but it's usually that. You can take a year out to do a different degree, to get usually a Bachelor of Science. I mean, you can get a Bachelor of Arts, but it's usually a Bachelor of Science in a year. So I took a year out of medicine, and I got a BSc in Anatomy, Developmental, and Human Biology at King's. You get an extra degree, which is always good. You can further your interest in a certain field, even though the field I deferred my interest in, I probably don't want to go into anymore. But regardless. And it's a more relaxed year than medicine. Medicine's intense. There's a lot going on. Whereas an intercalated degree is a normal year at uni. I was in 2 days a week, and had just like a coursework. Lots of my grades. I pretty much knew my final grade before I even went to my exams. So I had loads of coursework. Whereas with medicine, it's exams. But yeah, like I said, this is my 5th year at medical school, and I am still having the time of my life. So like when I said at the start, the hardest thing about medical school is getting in, and that is true. The reason medicine is hard isn't because it's conceptually hard, it's because the amount you have to know is obscene. There is so much content to learn, and that is also, excuse me, that is also why medicine is one of the only pass-fails, I think it is the only pass-fail degrees left. Thank you very much. Thank you. Because there is so much to learn, you aren't graded at medicine. You pass or you fail each year, and then pass or fail at the end. You can graduate with honours, I think, but that's like the top 1%. And I mean, if you're that person, fair play. But if you're the top 1% of medical graduates in the country, I'm going to go for it. So there's a lot to learn. So that's why it's intense. You can't, I've only been back in this year since the end of August, and I'm already revising for my exams in the year because you have to keep, I'm building my revision decks and this kind of stuff because you have to. Because while I'm revising, I'm on placement at the same time. So I'm on obstetrics and gynecology at the moment. And yes, they've very nicely, the hospital's given us a week off this week. But like last week, I was on labour ward every day for the whole day. And I've got to be doing work at the same time as that. And playing sport. Well, I mean, I don't play sport anymore, but most of my friends do. I just don't because I've had a few knocks on the head. So it's a lot to do, and that's what makes medicine hard. But it is the time of your life. That's all I can say about it, really. And you have your exams at the end of the year. They're tough exams, like I say, but they are pass-fail. That's the biggest thing to remember in medical school. They are pass-fail. And some medical schools will give out so my medical school gives out distinctions to people who finish in the top 10% of the year and merits to people who finish in the top 25%, but outside the top 10%, which is great. I have 1 or 2 of them, but it doesn't actually really make a difference because it's not going to make a difference on the jobs I get at the end. I'm going to qualify with an MBBS degree like everyone else. I'm going to work as an F1 like everyone else. So it's lovely to have it, and when I graduate or get read out, brilliant. But in the grand scheme of things, it's not that big of a deal. But yeah, so that's really everything that I'm going to say about medicine. I promise, gents, I know some of you are waiting for me to get onto pro sport. I will get onto it. I'll hand over to Dad to chat about sort of beyond medical school, which I'm not quite there yet. And then I'll come back and I'll give a bit of an insight into the pro sport life.
So I'll let you ask some questions in a sec, but the other thing we thought we would quickly cover is gap years. So there is an opportunity when you leave school to have a year off before you go to university. I had 3 years off when I left school before I went to university, not entirely out of choice. I was a thicko and didn't get great A levels, had to retake my A levels, and then took a long time for me to get into medical school. And that's not to be recommended. And I'm afraid in this day and age, if you don't get good A levels the first time round, your chances of getting into medical school with retakes is pretty much zero. It will not occur. It was not uncommon when I did it. 50% of the people I went to medical school with had done retakes. That just doesn't happen nowadays. You don't have to do a gap year. But if you're going to do a career in a medical field, whether it's going to be a doctor, physio, dentist, occupational therapist, nurse, whatever you're going to be, 50% of those people who are in those careers will not have done a gap year. But I can guarantee to you, if you ask the people who haven't done a gap year, do you regret not doing a gap year? 100% of them will tell you they regret it. And I think you should do a gap year, and I think it's really important. And Finn's my youngest son. I've got 4 sons. All of my boys have gone to university. All of them have done gap years, and I've pretty much forced them to do it. And I think there's 4 reasons you should do a gap year. The first is, you're in an amazing place here in Stowe, but this is a pretty closeted institution. And if you go from a relatively closeted institution into another relatively closeted institution at university and medical school, and you are going to be dealing with the general public, when have you actually been out there and experienced real life? And you have to develop what's known as empathy. You know what empathy is? Yeah. So what's the difference between empathy and sympathy?
Empathy, I think, empathy, I think, is the ability to... Sympathy is like, if you feel bad for someone, you kind of, I sympathise with you. But empathy is kind of being able to know what they're feeling and respond your actions coinciding to how they feel. It's kind of, Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so empathy is understanding the situation that people are in. And if you've never been out in the big wide world, that becomes quite difficult, and you will be a better doctor, nurse, physio, dentist if you've just been out in the big world. So that's number 1. Number 2, I've already alluded to. So you're going to leave Stowe age 17 or 18. You are not going to finish taking exams at medical school until you're 36 to 40. So you've got exactly the same amount of your life again before you finish taking exams. That's a jolly long time. And once you get on that gravy train, once you're on that conveyor belt, it's quite difficult to step off it. And the perfect time to step off and have a break is between school and university. So number 2 reason to have a gap year. Third reason to have a gap year, Finn has alluded to. University, and particularly medical school, is the best 5 or 6 years of your life. I would go back tomorrow. I had the best time ever.
You tried to come back,
I loved it. But if you can go to university, having had a year out where you've learned how to manage a budget, how to stop yourself getting too drunk, how to get yourself out of the gutter when you are drunk, how to not end up in bed with someone that you're going to regret about in the morning, how to make sure that you can get from A to B and sort yourself out, you will just be that little bit more mature at university, and you will enjoy university that little bit more because you're less likely to make the awful mistakes. And then the final thing Finn also alluded to, you can forget the other 3 reasons. As the 4th reason is by far the most important. So when you leave medical school, you leave with a degree, and there is no grade. So put yourself in my position. For every job that I advertised to come and work with me, I would get between 60 and 150 applicants. In the bad old days, when I applied for a job, you used to have to write a letter and physically write a curriculum vitae, a CV. And we didn't have computers when I was doing that. We had to handwrite those and type those ourselves. And it was relatively easy. I used to come home, my wife will tell you, I used to come home with this great pile of applications and CVs. And if you couldn't write English and you couldn't structure a CV, I just used to throw it out. That made it very easy. So put yourself in my position. When you apply to every single job you're going to apply for the rest of your life, it's going to appear on one of these, on a computer. And it's all done on a form that is standardized. So put yourself in my position. I've got to look at 120 applications that look exactly the same. You all do a degree that's not graded. So I have no idea whether you're a 51% pass student or a 99% pass student. And it doesn't matter in medicine which university you go to. Right? So getting a degree in medicine from Cambridge is exactly the same as getting a degree in medicine from Southampton or Edinburgh or Glasgow or Dublin. It's exactly the same. So it makes no odds to me at all. So how do I know that I'm going to interview you? What makes you stand out from the crowd? And I can tell you at work, Finn will tell you on his placements, I don't talk about medicine all the time to the people I'm working with. I talk about the sport that's happened at the weekend and the party you went to and the parties we are going to go to and the gigs we might think about going to. I want to be working with people that are interesting and fun to be with. So have something on your CV, on your application that makes you different. And to do that, it's like when you're doing your UCAS application and your personal statement, you need to have something that makes you stand out. So go and do a gap year and do something that makes you stand out from the crowd. Go and canoe the Okavango. Go and run a football camp in Toxteth. Go and teach hockey in Uganda. Go and do something that's different, that makes me look at your application and go, gosh, that's different. And it will at least get you an interview. And then it's up to you at the interview. So I think it's really, really important to do a gap year. Your parents might disagree. They may want you to get to university as soon as possible. But for you and your career, I think it's really, really important. All right? So what I suggest we do, why don't we stop there for a moment? We'll take a few questions about applications, getting into med school and stuff like that. And then I'll hand over to Finn. We'll talk a little bit about professional sport. And then I'll talk a little bit more about careers in medicine and beyond. Is that all right? So has anyone got any questions?
We can start. Should we
Go for it. Go on then.
So thank you so much for that. Really, really valuable insight. Just to start, at the start when you decided I want to do medicine, what was the kind of, what sparked you? What was the thing that made you think I'm gonna pursue a career in medicine?
Go on, Dad.
So I didn't want to be a doctor. I wanted to be a vet, but I was too thick. There was no hope of me getting into veterinary school with the A-levels I'd got, and even back in the dinosaur age when I was doing it, doing retakes for veterinary school was a complete no-no. So that was out of the question. And then I really wanted to be a farmer, and I really stupidly didn't follow that. I thought that because we didn't have a family farm, we didn't have lots of family money, that farming was out of the question for me, and I didn't go down that route. And that was stupid. That was just because I didn't get good advice. And then almost everyone in our family, apart from my parents, were doctors. So I'd been exposed to medicine, and that's what kind of took it for me. Finn was a bit different.
Yeah, I was quite different in that, obviously I was always exposed to medicine because of Dad. And so I got exposed to it that way, but it wasn't necessarily something I'd always thought about, maybe I would do it. And then I had a teacher in fourth form at Pangbourne. She told me that because I was quite good at sciences, she thought I'd only thought about medicine. And I thought about it more and more. I thought, yeah, actually, I really might like to do this. At which point I made the grave mistake of telling Dad that I might want to do medicine. And Dad then spent the next probably year to 2 years desperately trying to put me off. In the sense, like I said, I organised my work experience through slightly nepotistic routes. I didn't do it with Dad, but I did it with some of his colleagues at his hospital. And I only found out afterwards that Dad had told his colleagues to just show me the worst and most horrible things possible. So the first thing I ever did in a hospital outside of being a patient was at the age of 16, I went into the colonoscopy of a 74-year-old woman, which, for those that don't know, colonoscopy is when you have a camera put up your bum. And when you're 16 and the patient on the table is 74, it's not really the glamour that you saw on Grey's Anatomy and thought you might be getting involved in. But I was absolutely determined to defy Dad. So I stuck with it. And no, it was the work experience for me. I did my work experience because I thought I might like to do this and sort of toyed with the idea. Did 3 or 4 days in the hospital, whatever it was. And I came out, I was like, yeah, this is it. This is definitely what I'm going to do. At the time, this is definitely what I'm going to do if rugby doesn't work out. Rugby did work out, but then, which I'll come on to in a second when we get onto it, I actually decided I would rather do medicine than do rugby. But yeah, that was it. That's why I recommend do work experience. It will tell you in an instant.
Thank you. You mentioned earlier that you're trying to balance your revision and also your placement. How do you think it is, like how achievable do you think it is having a good work-life balance?
Yeah, it's really achievable. It is achievable. I'd like to think I have quite a good work-life balance. But the way it becomes incredibly achievable is you remind yourself of two things. One, you are only human, and two, it is a pass-fail degree. If you come out of your exams at the end of the year and you've got 80-90%, brilliant, but you've actually probably done the year wrong, and you're probably going to burn out in the next year or two. So once you've accepted those two things, it becomes relatively easy. The key thing with medical school, like I say, my exams aren't until June or July. But you just have to constantly stay on top of it. When you have an hour or two, I'll tell you now, your medical school will tell you differently. When you get to medical school, you're meant to be in placement from 8:30 till 5. You are not in placement from 8:30 till 5. When you leave the hospital at lunchtime, you get home, just do an hour or two, and then crack on with, if you're going out that evening with your mates or whatever. It's 100% possible. And then, this is I think, a UK-wide medical school thing. About 6 weeks before your final exams, everyone just shuts themselves away. Everyone just goes and shuts themselves in the library, and you then do lose a bit of your life balance at that point. But it's for a very short period of time. You do it for 5-6 weeks, you get your head down, you don't really go out. You might see your friends, but you're not doing big plans. And then you get it out the way, and then you can go back into that fun afterwards. But it's absolutely achievable. And the old adage of medical students work hard, play hard is completely correct. When you get to medical school, which you will within weeks you will realise when I played when I still played, I played in a cup final that my medics team play, and it's a famous cup called the UH Cup. It's the oldest competition in the world, and we were in the final, and you get a big crowd to this final. Now, as you can imagine, it's a bunch of students on a Friday night outside of Rugby pitch. I'll give you an idea. You can make up in your mind what the atmosphere is probably like. And a few of my home mates came to watch, and we won. Obviously, everyone's going ecstatic, going nuts. And a couple of my home mates came up to me and went, just asking, everyone here, they're going to be doctors, right? I was like, yeah, pretty much all of them. Like, right, I'm never going to the hospital ever again. So it's absolutely possible. Just remember you're human.
The other quick thing on that question is that Finn, God knows why, chose to go to the same medical school I did, but so we both trained at a medical school in London, and they are slightly different to medical schools outside London because by and large London medical schools you spend your time with other medical students, and that's not true outside London. So if you're going to go to medical school outside London, you are highly likely to be in a hall of residence or a flat with people who are not doing medicine. And that can be a very different experience because all degrees other than medicine have a very, very different life. Medicine has almost 100% what we call contact time. So he is in university in front of his tutors with people who are supervising him from 8:30 in the morning till 5:30 in the evening every day, well, except Wednesday, theoretically. Whereas most people who go to university, if you're doing a degree in history or art or something else, they might have 3 hours of contact time a week rather than 6 or 7 hours or 8 hours a day. So the other students have a very, very different perspective on life and should get better at working on their own in their own places. Medical students do it very differently. And you just have to keep that in mind. If you go to a university outside London, that you're going to be friends and associating with lots of people who work in a very different way to you.
So I know Demi's about the same question, but because it's different for me, like Dad says, because I'm in London, I'm basically a pure medical school. All of my uni friends are medics. It's enormously important if you do go to medical schools, you maintain friends who don't do medicine. Because honestly, people who do medicine are great. One of my best mates at uni all do medicine and they're great fun and I love them to bits. But if your entire life becomes medicine, firstly, that's route one to burning out, because you will find this, medics are medics. It doesn't matter how much you say, right, let's not talk about medicine. Once, if you go sit down the pub, someone will bring up something medical. It's just how it works. Yeah. And you need to have the part of your life that isn't that. And similarly, then if you don't go to university, which is purely medicine, which is literally any medical school that isn't in London, make the friends outside of medicine. It's important you make friends in medicine as well, so that they're on the same life as you. But oh my word, you've got to have friends outside of medicine. It's otherwise, your life will drag on a bit.
So earlier we were talking about interviews, and obviously each university has quite a unique way. A lot of them do MMIs now, but still they have different kind of stations. If you were to give some crucial advice for preparation for an interview, what would you say is the best way the aspiring medical student could go about preparing?
Oh, that's a good question. Can I give two answers for MMI and non-MMI?
Yeah.
So for MMI, there must be, because there was when I applied, there's lots of books you can get with various different stations people are throwing out. I highly recommend those books, but the way to use them, this is the best way to prepare for it, is find a family member or a friend. They don't have to be a medic, they don't have to be anything to do with medicine. Give them the book, ask them to flip open to a page, and basically have that station with them. And just practice that, because you need to get good at having things thrown at you in an MMI situation which you're not expecting, and how to think on your feet. In terms of the panel interview, and this does also kind of go across to MMI, but the panel interview, they will, like you say, every medical school has, I interviewed at Southampton, Barts, which is where I am, and St George's, and all three were different. Barts just a regular panel, Southampton was MMI, St George's was MMI, and Southampton was a panel, but then also like a table discussion. It was quite odd. But the same generic things will come up. You will be asked why medicine. You will probably be asked why this medical school. You'll be asked questions, things like, can you tell me about a time when you had a conflict and how did you resolve it, that kind of stuff. And the best way to prepare is think about those questions and think about how you're going to be different to everyone else. Because every single one of those questions has an answer or two answers, which is really generic and loads of people will use. The classic one, which I'm sure you know, is why medicine? Oh, I like helping people. Brilliant. Everyone likes helping people. Well, anyone who's got a good heart on them. So things like I remember, you can use it if you want, but I remember it so clearly when I got asked why medicine, because I got asked all three why medicine. I talked about how I love problem solving. I love problems that fight back, which is essentially what medicine is. And it's just a very different answer that will make them listen. And you don't have to use that one, but yeah, you need to be different. That's the point of the interviews. You need to be made different to the other people. They're gonna have the same grades as you. Personal statements are gonna be pretty similar. Let's be real. Everyone writes medical school personal statements in a similar format. You might have sports stuff to go with, but just be different. That's the biggest thing, and work out ways you're gonna be different.
So how do you think the medical field has changed since you started, and what changes do you anticipate in the future?
It's very different. You probably have seen, and Finn will tell you, being a junior doctor in the NHS in the UK now is a hard place. It's really, really hard work. And you should not go into it thinking that it's all going to be wonderful, rosy work. And you absolutely shouldn't go into it thinking you're going to come out a millionaire either. You're going to earn you're never going to be poor, but you're not going to be rich. You will be comfortable. When I started, it was very different. When I started as a junior doctor, we regularly worked 90 to 110 hours a week. That was totally standard. We all did what were called 1 in 2s. So you worked one day, you were on call that night, and you worked the following day. And when you were on call that night, you didn't go to bed. You were up all night. So you worked absolutely flat out for 36 hours, non-stop. And then you had that. You finished work the following day at about 6 or 7 in the evening. You go home, you'd have a meal, you go to the pub, you get drunk, and you go into work the next day. And we worked that way. I worked that way for about 15 years. And then the law changed. And so one of the challenges now for me as a consultant is that we are still bound by the European Working Time Directive. And so none of my trainees are allowed to work more than 48 hours a week. And that is good in that you should not be burning out. but it is a real challenge for you to learn all the craft of whatever speciality you go into in the time that is allotted. And lots of junior doctors opt to do more work than that. One of the things that's, in many respects, that's a good thing, and you definitely have a life outside medicine that I never had. And that's a good thing. The bad thing about that is that because you are limited in the amount of hours you can work, when I started, we very much had what was known as a team structure. So you worked in what we called firms, and I worked in medicine. And I had a consultant who was my boss, I had a registrar over me, a senior house officer, and I was the houseman. And we were a team. And we were together every day as that team, and we would always go to the pub after work as the team, and we did everything as a team. And I could refer to my consultant as a friend all the time. That doesn't exist now. Team working is extremely difficult now, and everyone as a junior works in shifts. That is much better for your working life. It's not so good for the patients, and and as a junior doctor, it's quite hard to feel a valued member of the team, and that's a real struggle. So if there's anything that's going to change in future years, it's going back to some form of team working, and that's got to happen. That really has got to happen.
Should we move on to sport?
Yeah, we're probably going on far too long. Right, so I'm going to introduce, because I'll let Finley fill in. So Finn, when he was your age, had already had an international cap. So he got his first England rugby cap age 12, I think. Well, yeah. Well,
I played the Lambs, the England prep schools at 12. I got my first England cap. So yeah, I started playing rugby when I was 4, down at the local rugby club, and so I played at my local rugby club quite a lot. I played a little bit at school as well, at prep school, and at Pangbourne, and I wasn't bad, and so I started playing for sort of county and things like that, and I then was picked up by the London Irish Academy at the age of 12 or 13. And like Dad says, I play for the Lambs, which I think still exists. I play for the Lambs under 13s. It's like I didn't know that. He's the vice president, apparently. So that's like, it's like England prep schools. So I played for them at under 13s. And then when I was 16, so still in the London Irish Academy, I captained the England under 16s against Wales. We were the last ever edition of it. So it's quite a cool thing I like to say, but I'm the last ever England under 16 captain. So England 16, they used to, every year they played one game. We played, the academies would play at the Wellington Festival, where all the academies went and played there at Wellington for a week, and then they picked an England 16 team from that. So I played for them. I then moved into the under 18s, played for the London Irish under 18 side in the Academies Premiership, which still exists as well. And I also played for England under 18s. Now I went on tour to South Africa with the England under 18s, and I played, ironically, in South Africa, played against France, Wales, and South Africa. I captained one of those games against Wales, and then I went into my upper 6th year, so again, London Irish under 18s. And unfortunately, just before the under 18 Six Nations, I'd been in, well, I can't guarantee I would have been in the squad, obviously, but no, not yet. We're getting there, don't worry. I can't guarantee I would have been in the squad for the under 18 Six Nations, but about a month before they were due to announce the squad, I took my hamstring off the bone, playing against Epsom in the NatWest Cup final. And that was my season done. So I didn't play for the England under 18s anymore, but I was very luckily and fortunately, well, also through a bit of hard work, was given a professional contract at London Irish, sort of a month after that hamstring injury happened. So it was perfect for me because I've spoken a lot about medicine, obviously. I had already decided through some serious guidance from Dad that I was going to take a gap year. And I decided that before I got off this contract, and I decided I'd either take my gap year, do a normal gap year, probably work for a little bit, and then jet off to wherever, or get a professional contract and play rugby for a year. But I was absolutely certain I only wanted a year contract because then I could either leave naturally if I didn't like it and go to medical school, or I could just renew it and let medical school go and do something else, which is fortunate because they offered me a 1-year contract, so there's no sort of negotiating needed. So I signed it. I then did my A-levels, and I finished my A-levels, I think, on let's say it was the 18th of June. I started playing for London. Well, I started pre-season at London Irish on the 19th of June. So I may or may not have turned up after some fairly heavy A-level celebrations, but I fortunately had some very nice S&C coaches. And I got straight into it. So I started in that June. We had a long pre-season block because London Irish had just been promoted out of the championship. So there's in professional, I think this is the thing actually in all sports, but also in professional rugby, there is in their contracts, there's a legally protected time that after the end of the season, players must have, I think it's 5 weeks, 4 or 5 weeks where they are not playing rugby. It's legally protected to make sure that they can recover. But because London Irish had been in the championship the season before, the championship season finishes, I think, a good 3-4 weeks before the premiership, something like that. So we started pre-season about a month before the other premiership clubs. So it was pretty intense, a long time on pre-season. And so, like I say, I spent a year in it. I had some serious struggles with my mental health during my time in professional rugby for probably a multitude of reasons. If I'm totally honest, pro sport probably played a large part into that. And it wasn't London Irish and it wasn't rugby or anything like that. It was just being a professional sportsman. I really struggled with the pressure of it all. I really struggled with, at the time, what was my favourite thing in my life, which is rugby becoming my job. That can be really hard. I found that incredibly difficult. I struggled with the high pressure environment, all a host of things. And I was also, unfortunately, struggling with a string of a few injuries. Obviously, I'd had that hamstring injury, which by the time I had rehabbed, I've had a multitude of problems with my hamstring since. But that had rehabbed, but I then, I broke my hand, I did lots of things, and I'd also had a few concussions. And it all sort of came to a head. So I got picked for the England Under-20s training squad for the Under-20 Six Nations. We went into camp at Bisham Abbey. I think it was like 45 of us. And it was at that point I don't know if I was being harsh on myself or whatever, but I felt I had really reached my peak at that point. I was in England Under-20s camp with guys who, I don't know if anyone watched the England game on Saturday. George Martin, who started in the second row. I was in the camp with him. Alfie Barbary, who now plays for Bath loads, was a back rower. He was one of my competition. I was also a back rower. And I really, really felt out of my depth, and something I really struggled with, and again, which I then led to some serious mental health struggles, unfortunately. And I then, that December, so again, it was almost like, a year or 2 years on from when I did my hamstring, I was playing as Harlequins in what was then it's called the A-League. This doesn't exist anymore. It's like the second team league for Premiership teams. And their number 8, who had just come back from the World Cup with Namibia, decided that he wasn't happy that I was doing fairly well against him that night. So took it upon himself to remove me from the game, which was, I can show you a picture after this, a forearm to my forehead, which led to me lying on the floor very still for quite a while. Dad still can't believe it wasn't a red card. And that led to a pretty horrible concussion, which I went to see a specialist and things like that. And it also it was around the similar time where contract renewals were starting, and I was offered another contract, very kindly from London Irish for 2 years. But I'd reached the point where the concussions weren't helping, obviously. And I really, really wasn't happy. I really, really wasn't enjoying myself. And I actually kind of reached almost a point of clarity that I think along this whole time, the dream was actually probably not to be a professional rugby player. The dream was probably to be a doctor. So I decided to pursue that dream. I turned down my contract renewal. And then actually, London Irish, having sort of had long chats to them, learned sort of about the mental health things I had going on. They very kindly allowed me to leave my contract early in the March to go and travel a bit before I started university. However, unfortunately, someone ate a bat in China and I couldn't go travelling, which was a shame. But it is what it is. I'm planning on doing some travelling post medical school, so I'll get my fix. But yeah, so that was my time in professional sport. I think it's quite unique in that I don't think many people, especially at the age of 18, 19, don't enjoy being paid to do this, to play sport. You know, it is, when you really think about it, it's a pretty cool thing. But it was not for me. And like I say, it was nothing to do with London Irish. It was nothing to do with rugby. It was professional sport was not my thing. And there's not a part of me that ever looks back or regrets the day that I told them I didn't want that new contract in the slightest. It's quite cool for me now. I can go and sit in the stand, have a beer and watch my mates who I used to play with absolutely tear it up for England, which is always pretty cool. I am that really annoying guy who nudges everyone and goes, "Oh, I know him." But yeah, so that was my time in pro sport. I'm happy to answer any questions anyone may have about pro sport, about mental health in pro sport. I'm pretty open about this stuff. I give talks on mental health elsewhere as well, so I'm very happy to talk about it. You don't have to if you don't want to. But
Just give you an idea, for those of you who do, are maybe very good at sport. Finn was pretty good. It is pretty good. But he was playing at a high level of rugby from the age of 13. And we would go on family skiing holidays, and he couldn't go. He wasn't allowed to ski. We would go on family holidays in the summer, and he had to calorie count everything that he was eating, make sure that he was staying fit while we were all eating vast amounts of ice cream and beer, and he couldn't do that. So he had a brilliant time. It was an amazing thing, but for those years between the ages of 13 and 19, it was pretty hard work.
yeah, I suppose I actually haven't covered there something that Dad says. It's sort of Dad's brought up is that doing professional sport, and this is any sport. I have friends who have done full-time sport in other sports, friends who have sort of done hockey and things like that. One of my friends has just done, I can't remember how many Ironmans he's done now, but he does that loads. He's very good at them. Any pro sport comes with an enormous sacrifice. The amount of sacrifice you make in pro sport is just huge. Look, I'm not spending tonight trying to tell you don't pursue pro sport. If that's what you want, you absolutely should, because it's also amazing. I can tell you now, walking out onto a pitch, for me anyway, walking out onto a pitch wearing a white shirt with a rose in it with a few thousand South Africans scream at you is a pretty cool feeling. Well, it's sometimes a bit scary, but it's a pretty cool feeling. And that's when, you reap the reward of your sacrifice, having that experience. But you do miss out on, there are lots of things you do miss out on. There'll be parties you won't be able to go to, like Dad says, holidays you might not be able to go on. You have to put in special requests to go to things like, partners' graduations, stuff that usually are granted, but it's the fact you have to go through that. And like a Christmas is a really good example. I remember we train on Christmas Eve in the morning. We would then have Christmas Eve afternoon, evening off, Christmas Day off, and we had training on Boxing Day. New Year's Eve, I trained on New Year's Eve and had training on New Year's Day. I went to one of my friend's house, sat and played ball games till midnight, hugged everyone and left. You make a lot of sacrifices, which you need to definitely weigh up. Are those things you're prepared to make? If they are, do it. It is amazing. There are so many amazing things that come out of pro sports. So some of the most amazing moments, really, like in our modern history, a lot of them come from sport. So if that's what you want to do it. But just be prepared of what you're signing up for. Yeah. Any questions about sport stuff? No? No worries.
Can I ask one question of the girls? Is that right?
Yes.
Before we finish. What work experience have you done?
So I did some online webinars and stuff, and then I was in a dentist for about 3 days. Made me realise I don't want to go into dentistry, but that's what it's for.
Great call.
And then I had a bit of a shocker. I was writing my personal statement. It was about 2 weeks before the deadline, and I was going through with my teacher, and they were like, I've obviously written about my skills and stuff, but I hadn't got to that moment where you need to know, and it's and by some miracle, I had a few contacts, called a few people, and I was able to organise. It was just a day of work experience it was in a GP, quite local, and I think that kind of solidified it for me. I was just with a GP and with an AI AOP, but honestly, it was just like people coming in, and I think just seeing how doctors communicate with patients. I learned about like the ICE method, which was something that kind of changed my perspective, because like being in obviously GPs yourself as the patient, and then I was kind of there as like the doctor, watching the doctor and watching how the patient responded like positively to the doctor because of how they were making them feel. It was just like really, really valuable, and I think that kind of solidified for me that.
I think, sorry, just before you go, I think that's actually a really good point, is that work experience doesn't need to be weeks. A day is perfect. You're not going on work experience to learn medicine. You're going to see what it's like. So that's absolutely perfect. And also, if you already know ICE, you're going to be your first year clinical skills tutor's favourite person. That's all you do in first year.
We also volunteer in a care home, don't we, together?
Yeah, we did that.
So we do that. I did a week in a GP with an orthopaedic actually in Rugby, and then I did 2 weeks at Adam Brooks. I did orthopaedics, the emergency room, plastics, and microsurgery, and obstetrics too.
Perfect.
At Adam Brooks. That was really, really good fun. Yes.
And you still decided you want to do it?
Yes, absolutely loved it. I really enjoyed the hospital environment more so than the GP. I think I could really see myself working in a hospital.
I mean, the thing when you do work experience is when you do it, ask the people, can you honestly see yourself doing that for the next 50 years? Because you're gonna come out of medical school aged about 24, and the way the world is going, it is highly unlikely, well, it's highly likely by the time you get to my age that the retirement age will have gone from 67 to 70 something. So are you really going to be able to do that for the next 50 years? And I ran away early. I burnt out. I took on one of my problems. One of my problems was, Finn will tell you, I'm my own worst enemy. I am very bad at saying no. So I took on far too many responsibilities and I burnt out. So I retired earlier than most of my colleagues. Most of the people of my age are still working.
A lot of doctors I shadowed actually did tell me, are you sure you want to do medicine? Because it's not how it appears.
100%. All I would say is I come across them weekly on placement. You come across a doctor who is either having a bad day. Fair enough, they actually might be genuinely not enjoying themselves, but a lot of them might be having a bad day or whatever, and then they see a student or work experience, they go, oh, you really want to do this? It's just the worst. Like, obviously there are so many downsides to it, but I've now been at medical school for 5 years, lots of my friends are now doctors, and don't get me wrong, they have hard days, but last week I went to the football with my friend Arjun, who's been an F1 now for 3 months, and we sat down in the pub beforehand, and I asked him, I was like, are you enjoying it? He was like, yeah, I love it. He was like, don't get me wrong, I've got hard days, but I absolutely love it.
I think with every career, there's going to be the pros.
Exactly.
I mean, as you said with the rugby, there were the amazing bits, but then also the downsides. And I think there's the kind of stigmatism about medicine. But if you'd ask someone working in HR the same question, they might say, "Oh, I hate this bit of my job, but I also love that part." So it's just like, yeah.
And then the one last thing I might add is, it took me until I was 50 years old to realise that a degree in medicine is just a degree. I really felt I was going into medicine and it was a vocation and I couldn't do anything else. If I was going to leave medicine, what on earth was I going to do? And that was so wrong. If you decide 5-10 years down the line that it really isn't for you, fine. You've got a degree. The fact you have a degree in medicine doesn't matter at all. Finn will tell you his 3 oldest brothers have all got degrees, and they've all are working in professions that they didn't get their degree in at all.
Medical degrees are also looked on quite favourably by quite a lot of companies. I don't know if they still have it, but it's one of the banks, one of the trader banks in London, I can't remember which one, used to literally have a scheme for MBBS graduates to then go into finance. Because if you've got a medical degree, it goes without saying you're intelligent, you work hard. Like, you can't get a medical degree without those 2 things. So some people they'll see MBBS, they'll go, whoa, yeah, we'll have you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
No
so
worries.
much.